International business refers to any business activity conducted across national borders. It is any situation where the production or distribution of goods and services crosses country borders. Trade existed since the beginning of civilization. Initially, items were traded or bartered between neighboring communities. As civilizations grew for small settlements and transportation became more sophisticated, trade became the means for learning about one another and stimulated growth in other parts of the world. The importance of precious metals also increased as some communities mined for gold and silver and then traded for food and other supplies. This eventually led to the development of money, which could be used to buy and sell commodities. Some advantages of international trade are the following. First, it provides goods and services. Through international trade, more choices of goods and services are available. Yes, if our economy does not open internationally, siguro wala kayong iPhone ngayon. Walang products na made in China. Second, it provides employment. Jobs are created because of free trade. In early 2000 or late 90s, biglang nag-boom ang BPO industry, and more international clients and more investments were coming in the country. This led to more workers needed in the manufacture and services sectors of the country. Third, it dictates the cost of goods and services. Because of international trade, competition increases. Competition among producers causes the price of the goods to fall. For example, in the Philippines, there was a time that rice supply in the country was not enough for consumption. In short, there was rice shortage. And so the price has increased sharply in a span of time. Because of this, the government imposed or created the so-called rice tariffication law. Under this law, it permits the entry of imported rice while imposing a tariff. With the provisions under the law, more rice have been imported from countries like Thailand and Vietnam. In effect, it increases the supply of rice and competition as well among local rice producers or rice sellers, thus decreasing the price of rice. Lastly, international trade paves way for globalization. When we talk about international trade, we can't avoid the term globalization. Globalization is defined as the spread of products, technology, information, and opportunities across national borders and culture. Globalization is the integration of national economies through trade between different countries, investment in other countries' stock markets, capital flows from one country's residents to another, labor migration, and technology. So again, globalization, hindi lang siya nakafocus on trade between countries, but on other aspects such as labor migration, technology, and the likes. And we will tackle these terms in the future. One cause of globalization is the drop in transport and communication costs. With the advancement of technology, imagine from telegraph to phone to internet, transportation and communication costs have greatly declined, and trade-related transactions have become so easy and fast. Another reason for globalization is the drop in tariffs with the advent of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade or GATT, and then the World Trade Organization or WTO. The creation of GATT or WTO decreases the tariffs and other trade barriers. The GATT has increased international competition and represent a valuable step forward for global trading relations. Later in 1995, the GATT was replaced by the World Trade Organization or WTO. Again, globalization has expanded with the birth of this trade organization through the trade policies it created. The following are examples of international trade. Countries are importers when they buy goods and services from other countries, and countries are exporters when they sell goods and services to other nations or other countries. If exports exceed imports, the country has a favorable balance of trade called a trade surplus. Conversely, if the value of imports exceeds the value of exports, the country has an unfavorable balance of trade called a trade deficit. We determine a country's balance of trade by subtracting exports and imports, or X minus M. We will have an actual example of this one later. Next example is foreign direct investment or FDI. FDI refers to the formal establishment of business operations on foreign soil, or the building of factories, sales offices, and distribution networks to serve local markets in a nation other than the economy's home country. One common example of FDI is the MNCs or multinational corporations. These are companies that operate in many countries. For examples, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Jollibee, and among others. Franchising and licensing are also examples of international business.
Franchising is based on a marketing concept which can be adopted by an organization as a strategy for business expansion. Where implemented, a franchisor licenses its know-how, procedures, intellectual property, use of its business model, brand, and rights to sell its branded products and services to a franchisee. While licensing is a business arrangement in which one company gives another company permission to manufacture its product for a specified payment. An example would include Walt Disney granting McDonald's a license for McDonald's to co-brand its McDonald's Happy Meals with a Disney trademarked character.
Now let us take a look at this data of the Philippines on trade. The diagram here presents the trade performance of the country. The blue bars represent the 2019 transactions, while the yellow bars represent the 2020 trade or May 2020 trade transactions. As you can see, total trade of the country in May 2019 was at around $16 million. But in 2020 or May 2020, it decreased sharply by around 38% of its total value or around $9 million. Kung tingnan natin yung yellow bar, ang layo ng height niya from the blue bar. Almost half, di ba? Ibig sabihin, malaki ang ibinaba ng total trade in May 2020. What do you think, guys, was the possible reason with this situation? Did you say because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Yes, malaki ang naging epekto ng pandemic sa trade domestically or internationally. Maraming businesses ang nagsara, walang produksyon, walang operasyon. If we take a look naman sa exports and imports performance of the country in the last 2 years, ganun din. By the way, total trade is the sum of exports and imports. So if we will add exports and imports, that's equal to total trade. So if we will, for example, if we will add the value of exports in May 2019 plus the value of imports in May 2019, so that is equal to total trade in May 2019. At kung mapapansin nyo, mas malaki ang value ng imports than the value of exports in both years. And that's why here our balance of trade was negative, or there was a trade deficit in both years also. To calculate the balance of trade, so to calculate this figure here below, we simply subtract exports and imports, or exports minus imports. Again, as I have said earlier, if exports exceed imports, the balance of trade is positive, or there is trade surplus. Conversely, if the value of exports is less than the value of imports, the balance of trade is negative, or there is trade deficit. So, ano kaya ang mas maganda? Trade surplus or trade deficit? Another figure showing the top 5 commodities we exported. We have electronic products, machinery and transport equipment, other manufactured goods, other mineral products, and bananas. Another figure showing the major trading partners of our country in May 2020. So we have exported those commodities in Japan, Hong Kong, China, USA, Singapore, and so on. This figure shows the commodities we imported from other countries. So similarly, we import electronic products, then transport equipment, cereals, industrial machinery and equipment, and other food and live animals. So in May 2020, the same situation na mas mababa ang imports natin. So affected yung imports and also yung kanina yung exports because of the pandemic. Okay, saan ba tayo nag-import? Of course, sa China, Korea, US, Japan, Singapore. So, makikita dyan kung saan mostly nanggagaling ang mga imported goods natin. So, number 1 yung China. This figure naman shows the trend ng exports natin, yung monthly growth niya. Kung mapapansin natin, erratic yung movement ng graph at kapansin-pansin din na pagdating sa 2019, biglang tumaas ang growth ng export. But, bigla din namang bumaba sa mga buwan ng 2020. And this figure shows the trend of imports from 2018 to 2021. In 2018, So, dito, there was a positive growth of import. Ibig sabihin, month by month, tumataas yung value of imports natin. In 2019, medyo negative na at pagdating sa 2020, there was a sudden decline in the growth of imports. Okay, so yun yung status ng trade natin. So why do trade go international? Di ba pwedeng tayo na lang dito sa Pinas? Walang China, walang Korea, etc. Similarly, kung taga Marawi ka, pwede bang sa Marawi ka na lang din magtitinda? Wag nang pumunta pa sa Iligan or CDO? Pero bakit hindi ganun, guys? These are among the reasons why trade go international. The costs of labor, the availability of natural resources, and the level of know-how vary greatly around the world. So, first reason, we have cost savings. Meron tayong tinatawag na absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Later in our course, we will talk about it deeply. Sometimes, because of high domestic labor costs, many companies manufacture their products in countries where labor costs are lower. Example, iPhone is designed in California but assembled in China. In the US, for example, the average IT specialist or programmer can earn around $30 to $40 per hour. But in India, the same job pays approximately $7 to $8 per hour only. Can you imagine how much the company saves kung merong job outsourcing? Second reason is new sales. International expansion can improve national revenue even if it performs well domestically. Then next, new talent or skills. With international trade, speaking in different languages is a huge advantage. Most people appreciate some effort to communicate in their local language, even on the most basic level. Similarly, nonverbal language is equally important to consider as part of each and everyone's culture. Next reason is diversifying. International operation allows diversification. This is to take advantage of the raw materials not available in the domestic market. And lastly, foreign investment. Sometimes government may offer incentives for companies looking to invest in other regions.